This is unique. Eventually, it will become merely incredibly rare. But right now, this really is one of a kind. The only P1 Spider in the universe. And this is the first time it's been released into the wild. We've been given a limited mileage, so we've brought it somewhere that I can make the most of every single yard.
This is the sound! This is just as crazy as ever.
If this film tickles your fancy, please think about Johnny the Hagerty Drivers Club. You get a magazine that's award-winning, and if you drive something old and British, you'll appreciate the 24/7 roadside assistance. To discover all the benefits or simply appease the algorithm, just click on the link in the description down below. This is Lanzante, birthplace of the P1 Spider, and so much more. It started under Paul Lanzante in the 1970s, doing restorations and preparations of historic race cars. Then, perhaps most famously, it was Team Lanzante that ran the McLaren F1 GTR that won Le Mans in 1995. But it was in the years after that, as the F1 GTR became non-competitive, that Lanzante, I'd say, really found its niche, converting some of those F1 GTR race cars into road cars. And that niche now continues with the modern McLarens. But how did the P1 Spider come about? Here's Dean Lanzante to explain a bit more.
P1 Spider was a customer ringing up. He'd seen a previous project of ours and literally rung up and said, I've always wanted a P1 Spider. I never knew who'd build it, but now I do. Will you do one for us? I didn't just agree straight away, obviously. You know, there's quite a lot to look into on this sort of scale of project. So once we were asked about that, we then look into the processes of it, engineering-wise and also styling-wise.
And you brought Paul Howes in straight away, and he obviously designed the P1 originally, so it must have been a dream come true, really, to have him do that.
But that was quite an interesting one too, because the customer that actually asked about it said, I've got some friends and they do renders and they've got some styling ideas. And we got these initial ideas. I was quite open about it, but then quite shocked, and to the point where we were about to bail on doing the project, because if it doesn't represent the business well and it doesn't represent what McLaren is, the last thing we want to do is destroy that. And it was a kind of last ditch thing. We were like, maybe we should give Paul a call and see if he had any ideas. He did one 3/4 rear view render literally in a couple of days, and we sent it off to the customer and he went, that's what we're going to build.
It looks like it should always have been this way, but obviously it's taken a lot of work and refinement to get it to this point.
That's been a blessing and a curse, because some people have kind of said, well, it doesn't look that different, when it is hugely different. But hopefully that's been a good thing, in that it's been executed in a way that it almost looks stock.
Alongside form is of course function, and getting the engineering right for this proved more complex than you might imagine. Like a 720S, the number of door hinges is halved on the Spyder version, but because of the aerodynamics behind the front wheels, the packaging of that single hinge is much tighter and more problematic on the P1. For stiffness and safety, the whole upper side of the carbon tub is also new, with a sturdier windscreen surround and integrated roll hoops. Smaller but no less important things like the fuel filler and charging port also had to be moved. And because this was always intended to be a Spider rather than a convertible, and therefore driven predominantly roof off, the seats use material from super yachts so that they can withstand a bit of weather. Until, that is, you can stop and pop the fabric lid on the car.
And it will have a roof as well, but the roof will be sort of styled like a sort of Boxster Spyder, Lotus Elise is sort of a temporary roof that will get you out of trouble. And then the benefits of having such a system as that is it can be retained in the front bonnet section.
And how many of these, you mentioned customers, how many of these are you going to build?
There'll be just one prototype and 5 production cars, and it is limited to that.
As well as keeping Paul Howes on speed dial for the design, Lanzante also employs the skills of the P1's original test driver, Chris Goodwin. But how has taking the roof off affected the feel and dynamics of the car? Time to head back to the road.
Straight away, it feels different in here, but sort of the same. You've still got that lovely seating position in this low down, seeing those angular sort of cheekbones to the front arches that make this car really easy to place. And yet the P1 always felt not claustrophobic, but just sort of snug in here, I suppose, because these seats were so close together. But now with the roof off, well, a bit more freedom, a bit more elbow room somehow. And 10 years on, how's the P1 feel? Still ridiculously quick. 903 brake horsepower, 664 pounds-foot of torque. Even on its own, has 727 brake horsepower and 531 pounds-foot of torque. That's 720S numbers without the hybrid.
The P1's e-motor contributes 177 brake horsepower and 192 pounds-foot of torque, which is 83 brake horsepower and 26 pounds-foot more than the latest Artura. McLaren now also offers owners an upgrade to the P1's original 4.7 kilowatt-hour battery, the new item prioritising performance over range, which was already a meagre 6.8 miles. It weighs just 110 pounds or 50 kilos, which is less than half the weight of the original battery, and brings the car's DIN curb weight down to 1,434 kilos.
The biggest question obviously has to be, how has taking the roof off that monocage 2 affected it? Does it now feel a bit floppy? And the answer is not at all. I wanted to come to a road like this that is properly bumpy, and it still feels stiff. The inherent stiffness of that carbon tub is absolutely intact. It's always been a little bit sort of one way or the other. Some McLarens have felt, wow, this is fast. And you've noticed them taking the roof off. But stuff like 675 LT, not a bit of it. And I think this is one of those. This is just as crazy as ever. Arguably more so because it's even more visceral. The sound in here is just crazy. Obviously, in the normal car, you had the intake down here, but that actually split to go either side anyway. So now, you've got these intakes just behind my head here and over that side. A bit like a GT4 RS, or I suppose a 718 Spider RS. And the noises you get is just this cacophony. There's so much going on at once. It's a bit like that moment in a classical concert before it starts when the whole orchestra is tuning up and all sort of fighting for attention. So many things going on at once. And the sounds themselves, it's like being caught in a sort of coastal cave during a storm with some angry animal. That hydro-pneumatic interlinked suspension does such a good job of soaking the bumps up. The steering is wonderful. Hydraulically power-assisted steering gives you that confidence in the front end. And the fact that it's had actually quite narrow front tyres, 245s, so you get that little bit of push in corners to start with, and obviously you can light up the rear. No limits to slip diff, just brake steer. Wow! Feel it moving on the brakes as well, those Akabono brakes. What a wild ride! A Phaeton Spider, where this takes its name from, is always the wildest of carriages, the most stripped out. This lives up to that.
You might think that in the 10 years since the P1 came out, its original hypercar wow factor might have mellowed to merely supercar levels. Its 2.8 second 0 to 62 mph time might feel a little dull, but not at all. The P1 definitely still feels like it deserves its ultimate series status.
It always felt just a little bit kind of almost unhinged, loose. It is a crazy car. It would be very easy to look at the sleek, smooth, elegant lines in this Spider and think that it was somehow softened in the driving experience, but that would be very wrong. It might have lost its roof, but this still has teeth.
I imagine that news will be a relief to the lucky prospective owners, particularly as each P1 Spider will cost £2.4 million, including donor car. Of course, some might quibble at the idea of losing a few of the original 375 P1s to create a handful of these open-top versions. But to me, this has been so well executed that it actually feels like the final missing chapter in that amazing hybrid hypercar story.
The 918 was always a Spider, the LaFerrari had the Aperta. This completes the trio.